8 minutes. That's how long it took them to erase 10 years of my life. I knew something was wrong the moment I saw Curtis and Raina waiting in the small conference room. Curtis, our new COO of exactly 7 weeks, wearing that navy suit he thought made him look authoritative. And Raina, from HR, clutching her tablet like a shield. "Winifred," Curtis said, not bothering to rise. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." I slid into the chair opposite them. The overhead vent blasted cold air directly onto my neck. "We've been analyzing departmental efficiency," he continued, tapping his gold pen against the glass tabletop. "After careful consideration, we've determined your position is redundant." My mind went blank. Redundant? The word tasted strange. "Your position is being eliminated," Raina clarified, her voice soft but rehearsed. "Effective immediately." I felt my shoulders stiffen. "I manage all our critical vendor relationships." "Yes, well," Curtis glanced at his watch. "We've assessed the redundancies. Your responsibilities will be distributed among the team." "The team I built," I said. He didn't respond to that. "Severance details are in this packet," Raina said, sliding a white envelope toward me. 2 weeks for each year of service. 10 years reduced to 20 weeks of pay. My hands remained flat on my lap. "I'll need your badge," she added gently. I unclipped it from my blouse. 10 years of dedicated work dangled from a lanyard. I placed it on the table. Neither of them knew I'd created our entire vendor certification system. From nothing. That I was the only one whose name appeared on the official authorization forms for every testing facility we used. "Is there anything you'd like us to know about immediate vendor concerns?" Curtis asked, already rising from his chair. I met his eyes. "Nothing comes to mind." He nodded, satisfied, too satisfied. As I walked to my desk to collect my personal items, my department watched in stunned silence. My assistant, Penny's eyes were wide with shock. "They can't just," she whispered. "Apparently they can," I said, taking only my framed certification from the wall and my spare sweater. I left everything else behind. That evening, my personal phone lit up with 17 messages. First from Penny, then from 2 account managers, then from the testing coordinator. By midnight, even Curtis had called 3 times, each voicemail more urgent than the last. I silenced my phone and slept dreamlessly for the first time in years. When I woke, sunlight streamed through my bedroom window. I made coffee and checked my messages. 47 now, the most recent from our CEO himself. It seemed they had discovered a problem. Our biggest project, the one worth $40 million, needed immediate certification from 3 testing authorities to meet regulatory deadlines. Authorities that would only recognize the person whose name was on the account, my name. What they hadn't realized, these weren't just corporate accounts you could simply transfer. Each certification required personal credentials, 2-factor authentication tied to my devices, and in-person verification that took months to establish. They had eliminated redundancy, all right. They had eliminated the only person who could access the systems they desperately needed. My phone rang again. This time, I answered. Winifred speaking. The voice on the other end belonged to the woman who would change everything. Before we continue this story, I'd love to thank you for reading this far. If you're enjoying this tale of corporate comeuppance, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more stories just like this one. Your support helps this channel grow, and I promise the revenge that's coming is worth every second of your time. Now, let's get back to what happens when companies underestimate the wrong person. My name is Winifred Lamar, not Winnie. Not Fred, Winifred. I'd spent my entire life correcting people who tried to shorten it. My grandmother gave me that name, and I honored her by using every syllable. I grew up in a small industrial town where everyone worked at the plant or supported those who did. My father was a quality control specialist who taught me that systems matter more than speeches, that details save lives, and that the person who understands how things actually work holds the real power. After college, I joined the company as an entry-level coordinator, responsible for scheduling equipment inspections. Back then, certification was a chaotic process. Vendors were contacted ad hoc, paperwork got lost, and deadlines were missed constantly. "This is unsustainable," I told my first manager after 3 months. "That's just how industrial certification works," he said with a shrug. That answer wasn't good enough for me. I started waking at 5 a.m. to call international testing authorities, learning their procedures, building relationships. I created tracking systems, standardized application processes, and eventually constructed an entire certification protocol. that became the backbone of our company's regulatory compliance. Over 10 years, I expanded from managing 3 vendors to coordinating with 17 certification authorities across 9 countries. I became the company's official representative, my name and credentials on every application. These weren't casual relationships. They were built on precise technical understanding and personal trust established over years. And now, the voice on the other end of my phone belonged to Talia, CEO of our main competitor. "I heard what happened," she said, terribly short-sighted of them. I said nothing, wondering how news had traveled so quickly. "We have an industrial filtration system that needs certification next month," she continued. "I understand you have unique expertise in that area." My mind raced through possibilities. "I do. Would you be interested in consulting? Just for this project initially, but perhaps with potential for something more permanent." I thought about my former employer, now discovering that none of their certification portals would accept new credentials without my in-person verification, a process that took months. "I might be," I said carefully. "Excellent. My assistant will email terms. In the meantime," her voice lowered, "has your former employer contacted you yet?" "They've tried," she laughed. "I imagine they have. Best of luck with whatever you decide to do about that." After hanging up, I checked my messages. Curtis had called 6 more times, the CEO, twice. Even Raina from HR had left a voicemail, her voice strained with poorly concealed panic. I made another cup of coffee and waited. 10 years they had taken from me. I could take a few hours from them. At precisely 10 a.m., my phone rang again. It was Curtis. "Winifred," he said, his voice artificially pleasant. "We seem to have a situation with vendor access." "How unfortunate," I replied. "We need you to transfer your credentials immediately. We'll pay your daily rate plus 50% for consultation until this is resolved." I almost accepted, then remembered how they'd eliminated 3 other long-term employees the same day as me, all women over 40, all replaced by younger, less experienced staff. "I'm unavailable for the next 2 weeks," I replied, my voice steady. "I'm focusing on job applications." "This is urgent," Curtis insisted. "The Westboro project has deadlines." "I'm aware of the deadlines. I set up the certification schedule last month." Silence. Then, "Name your price." "I'm not available," I repeated. "Best of luck figuring it out." I hung up and turned off my phone. They thought they held the power. They were wrong. They thought their urgency was my emergency. It wasn't. What they didn't know, I'd spent years building not just vendor relationships, but personal friendships with certification authorities worldwide. While the company couldn't transfer my credentials without me, I could absolutely recommend a competitor's representative for expedited processing. I opened my laptop and composed an email to the 3 authorities Curtis needed so desperately. I explained my departure and suggested they consider working with Talia's company, while mine reorganized their certification department. Then I opened Talia's contract offer. The consulting fee was generous, triple what I'd been making. I signed it immediately, packed a small bag, and drove to my parents' cabin by the lake. I'd take that 2 weeks after all, just not for job hunting. My phone remained off as I sat on the weathered dock, watching the sunset paint the water gold. For the first time in a decade, I had no meetings scheduled, no certifications pending, no crises to manage. The company I'd given 10 years to would soon discover exactly what they'd thrown away, and it would cost them far more than they ever imagined. When I returned from the cabin after 2 weeks, I had 17 voicemails, 34 emails, and a certified letter delivered to my home. The desperation escalated with each communication, from professional requests to thinly veiled threats about contractual obligations to finally, outright pleading. I plugged my phone in and listened to the most recent message as I unpacked. "Winifred, this is Alexander Portman, the CEO himself, voice tight with strain. Please call me on my personal line anytime, day or night. We need to discuss your return. Immediately." I smiled, slipping off my shoes. There was something deeply satisfying about hearing the man who'd barely acknowledged my existence for years suddenly unable to function without me. The next morning, I dressed carefully in my most professional outfit, not for a job interview, but for a negotiation. I called Alexander's personal number. "Winifred," he answered on the first ring. "Thank you for calling back." "I was away," I said simply. "We've been trying to reach you. There's been a misunderstanding regarding your position." I waited, saying nothing. My father taught me the power of silence in negotiations. Alexander cleared his throat. Curtis made an error in judgment. We'd like to correct that situation. By situation, you mean firing me after 10 years with 8 minutes notice? That decision has been reconsidered, he said, carefully. And the others who were terminated the same day? Has their situation been reconsidered as well? A pause. I'm not familiar with Helena from accounting, Diane from compliance, Janice from customer solutions. All women over 40 with institutional knowledge. All eliminated the same day as me. Another pause, longer this time. I'll look into those cases, but right now, we're focused on resolving the certification crisis. The Westboro deadline is in 10 days. 9, I corrected. And you need signatures from 3 different authorities, each requiring my verified credentials. Exactly, he said, relief in his voice. We're prepared to offer you a consulting contract at triple your previous salary to resolve this situation. I let silence hang between us again. Is that not acceptable? He asked finally. It's not about money, Alexander. Then what do you want? A face-to-face meeting. With you, the board chair, and Curtis. When? Today, 3 o'clock. I'll make it happen. I hung up and called Talia immediately. How goes the corporate warfare? She asked with amusement. I'm meeting with them today. I may need to adjust our timeline. Take all the time you need, she said. The opportunity remains open. Actually, I've been thinking about creating a director position for regulatory compliance. Someone with your expertise could revolutionize our certification processes. I appreciate that, I said. I'll keep you posted. One more thing, she added. I heard the Westboro certification is causing quite a panic over there. You could say that. Interesting coincidence. We just submitted our own certification for a similar project yesterday, with expedited processing. I smiled. Coincidence indeed. At 2:45, I walked into the company headquarters for the first time since my termination. The security guard did a double take. Miss Lamar, they said you'd be coming. Go right up. The elevator ride to the executive floor took exactly 47 seconds, a journey I'd made rarely in my decade with the company. Most days, I'd worked from my office on the 3rd floor, managing global certifications, while executives made decisions without understanding the operational realities. When the doors opened, I was surprised to see Penny waiting. Winifred, she hugged me before remembering herself. Sorry, they told me you were coming and I wanted to. She lowered her voice. Everyone's freaking out. Nothing's been certified since you left. Nothing. How are you doing? I asked. Her expression darkened. They've got me training your replacement. Some kid named Ryan who thinks he can learn your entire job in a PowerPoint presentation. She rolled her eyes. He keeps saying he'll streamline everything. I'm sure he will, I said with a smile that made her eyes widen. Alexander's assistant jumped up when she saw me. They're waiting for you in the boardroom. I checked my watch. 2:57. I'm early. They've been in there since 1, she whispered. I nodded and walked slowly toward the boardroom, feeling strangely calm. Through the glass walls, I could see Alexander pacing, Curtis sitting rigidly, and a woman I recognized as Vivian Chen, the board chair, speaking intensely. I pushed open the door exactly at 3. All 3 heads snapped toward me. Curtis paled visibly. Winifred, Alexander stepped forward, hand extended. Thank you for coming. I shook his hand briefly. Please, sit. Vivian gestured to the chair at the head of the table, Alexander's usual seat. I placed my portfolio on the table and sat down, taking my time to arrange my things while they waited in tense silence. I understand there's an issue with certifications, I said finally. Curtis leaned forward. The system you built is more complex than we realized. It's not complex, I replied. It's relationship-based. Each testing authority has specific requirements, security protocols, and verification processes. They don't deal with companies. They deal with authorized representatives. Representatives like you, Vivian said. Exactly like me. And these relationships take months to establish. Alexander looked pained. Which we don't have. The Westboro deadline will be missed, I finished for him, costing the company approximately $43 million in contract penalties, not counting reputation damage. Curtis swallowed visibly. Unless you help us. Yes, I agreed. Unless I help you. What would that entail exactly? Vivian asked, the only one maintaining her composure. I would need to personally validate new representatives with each authority. That means face-to-face meetings in 3 different locations. I'd need to vouch for whoever you've chosen to replace me. Ryan Keller, Curtis said quickly. I raised an eyebrow. The new hire, with 0 certification experience. Curtis glanced at Alexander, who nodded slightly. We can fast-track someone with more experience, Alexander said. Impossible, I replied. The authorities won't accept someone without a proven track record. They'd require at least 2 years of documented interaction before granting full access privileges. The room went silent as the reality sank in. Then what do you suggest? Vivian asked quietly. I opened my portfolio and removed a document I'd prepared that morning. These are my terms. Alexander reached for it, but I slid it toward Vivian instead. She read it carefully, her expression unchanging. Reinstatement of all recently terminated employees with back pay. She read aloud. Your return as Director of Certification with double your previous salary and direct board reporting. And a formal review of leadership's understanding of core operations. She looked up at me. Bold requests. Reasonable corrections, I countered. You eliminated 4 positions based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how this company actually functions. I'm offering you a way to fix that mistake. Curtis's jaw tightened. This is extortion. This is negotiation, I corrected. I'm simply establishing my market value, something you failed to assess before eliminating my position. And if we refuse? He challenged. I closed my portfolio. Then, I accept the director position I've been offered elsewhere, and you miss the Westboro deadline, along with every other certification deadline for the next fiscal quarter, at minimum. Vivian and Alexander exchanged glances. We'll need to discuss this, Alexander said. You have 24 hours, I replied, standing. After that, I'm accepting the other position permanently. Wait, Vivian said. You mentioned other terminated employees. Why include them in your terms? I looked directly at Curtis. Because eliminating experienced female employees over 40 and replacing them with younger, less qualified men isn't just bad business. It's legally questionable. Curtis's face flushed. We made those decisions based on redundancies. Yes, I remember. I headed for the door. 24 hours. As I waited for the elevator, Penny appeared beside me. What happened? She whispered. They're considering their options. Will you come back? I smiled. That depends on them. The doors opened, and I stepped in. As they closed, I caught a glimpse of Curtis watching me from the boardroom doorway, his expression a mixture of fury and fear. What he didn't know, I had leverage beyond just the certifications. In my decade managing vendor relationships, I'd documented every decision, every shortcut, every time an executive had overridden safety protocols for expediency. I had emails, meeting notes, and verification records showing exactly who had authorized what, when, and why. I hadn't planned to use any of it, but I was prepared to, if necessary. That evening, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I opened it, Helena from accounting stood there, eyes wide. Winifred? I just got the strangest call from HR, asking if I'd consider returning to my position with a promotion and back pay. She looked bewildered. Did you have something to do with this? I smiled and invited her in for coffee. They called me too, Diane said when I phoned her later. And Janice. We're all being offered our jobs back. Are you taking them? I asked. I'm considering it, she said cautiously, with better terms. But Winifred, what happens when they don't need you anymore? Won't they just do this again? It was the question that had kept me awake at night, the one I'd been turning over in my mind since that 8-minute meeting that erased 10 years. Not if we ensure they understand exactly what they nearly lost, I said. Not if we build safeguards. Not if we build safeguards. But doubt crept in as I lay in bed that night. Could I trust them? Should I simply take Talia's offer and walk away? My phone chimed with an email at 2:37 a.m. It was from Vivian Chen, not Alexander or Curtis. We accept your terms, it read, with one condition. I stared at Vivian's email for a long moment. One condition. These people had fired me with 8 minutes' notice after a decade of service. Now they wanted to negotiate? My finger hovered over the delete button. Then curiosity won. I opened the email. We accept your terms, with one condition. You must commit to training a proper succession team over the next year. The board agrees your department has been undervalued, but we cannot allow the company to remain vulnerable to the departure of any single employee again. I leaned back against my headboard. It was actually reasonable, smart, even. Vivian was acknowledging the mistake while ensuring it couldn't happen again. I typed a brief reply, accepted, with my own condition. I select the succession team. Her response came within minutes. Agreed. Contract will arrive in the morning. The board expects you tomorrow at 9 a.m. to address the Westboro certifications. I closed my laptop, feeling neither victorious nor defeated. This wasn't the end. It was barely the beginning. The next morning, I arrived at exactly 9 a.m. People stared as I walked through the office. News traveled fast. The woman who'd been escorted out 2 weeks ago was back with a promotion and direct board access. Penny squealed when she saw me, rushing over with a coffee. Is it true? You're the new director? It's true, I confirmed quietly. Her eyes widened. And Ryan? Is being reassigned, I said, accepting the coffee. Where is he now? In the office, trying to make sense of the certification applications. I nodded. And Curtis? Her expression darkened. In the executive conference room with the crisis team. They've been there since 7. I sipped my coffee and headed toward the elevator. Let's not keep them waiting. When I entered the conference room, 8 people turned simultaneously. Alexander rose immediately. Winifred, thank you for coming. He gestured to the chair beside him, a clear signal to everyone about my new status. Curtis sat across the table, his expression carefully neutral. Beside him was Ryan, looking overwhelmed and out of his depth. Let's get straight to business, I said, setting down my bag. The Westboro project needs 3 certifications within 9 days. 8 now, Ryan corrected, then flinched when Curtis shot him a look. 8? I agreed. I've reviewed the situation. 2 of the authorities will work with me directly to expedite new representative credentials. The 3rd requires in-person verification, which means, Alexander asked, I need to fly to Geneva tomorrow to personally introduce and vouch for whoever will manage these relationships going forward. Curtis leaned forward. Ryan can. No, I said flatly. The authorities require representatives with established industry experience. I've already contacted Helena from accounting, who managed vendor relationships before her department was restructured. She can be credentialed quickly because of her history. Curtis's jaw tightened. We terminated her position for efficiency reasons and rehired her yesterday based on operational necessity, Alexander interjected. His tone left no room for discussion. Winifred, what else do you need? Access to all certification records, reinstatement of my security credentials, and a direct line to the board for the next 2 weeks until this crisis is resolved. Done, Alexander said before Curtis could object. The meeting continued with me, outlining exactly what needed to happen. Ryan took frantic notes while Curtis grew increasingly silent. By the end, everyone understood their role in salvaging the Westboro project. As people filed out, Curtis lingered. Once we were alone, his demeanor changed. Impressive recovery, he said almost admiringly. I underestimated you. Yes, I agreed. You did, but this won't last, he continued, his voice softer. Once the certification crisis is resolved, things will normalize. The board has a short memory. I met his gaze steadily. Is that a prediction or a threat? He smiled thinly. An observation from someone who's survived many corporate cycles. Today's emergency is tomorrow's forgotten incident. Perhaps, I replied, gathering my things. Or perhaps, this is the beginning of structural change. He laughed quietly. We'll see. As he walked away, I realized he still believed this was temporary, that once the immediate crisis passed, the power dynamics would reset. He was wrong. The next 3 days were a blur of activity. I flew to Geneva with Helena, secured her credentials with the testing authority, and returned to find Diane and Janice already reinstated and working on their department's transitions. By day 5, we had 2 of the 3 certifications in process. The Westboro deadline still loomed dangerously close, but progress was being made. Then came the setback. I was working late when Ryan knocked on my office door, looking pale. There's a problem with the GCI certification, he said, referring to the 3rd and most critical authority. What kind of problem? They're saying our application format changed, and they're rejecting it. They need to revalidate our entire submission process. It could take weeks. My stomach dropped. This made no sense. I'd personally designed that application protocol. Who submitted the updated format? I asked. Ryan swallowed. Curtis approved the changes last week, said it would streamline things. Of course he had. I immediately called my contact at GCI, but it was after hours in their time zone. The earliest we could address it would be the next morning, cutting our timeline dangerously close. When I confronted Curtis the next day, he appeared genuinely surprised. I was trying to help, he insisted. Ryan suggested consolidating the application fields to reduce redundancy. Ryan nodded vigorously beside him. The old format had duplicate information requirements. Those duplicates were verification checkpoints, I explained, keeping my voice level. Each one serves a specific regulatory purpose. Curtis spread his hands apologetically. We didn't realize. Can it be fixed? I'm working on it, I said, but we've lost critical time. As I walked away, I heard Curtis murmur to Ryan, "This is why we need documented processes, not personality-dependent systems." He was building a narrative, one where this failure proved his point about systematizing everything. If the Westboro certification failed, he'd position it as evidence that my approach was flawed. I worked through the night, calling in favors from my contacts at GCI. By morning, I'd secured an emergency review of our submission, but it would still take them 3 days to process. We now had exactly 1 day of buffer before the Westboro deadline. Curtis wasted no time informing Alexander and the board about the unforeseen complication. His message, which I was copied on, subtly emphasized the risks of relationship-based systems without proper documentation. The trap was being set. If we missed the deadline, Curtis would use it to argue for his approach. If we made it, he'd claim it was because of the improvements they'd started implementing. Either way, he was positioning himself to regain control, or so he thought. On the morning of the deadline, I called an emergency meeting with the board, Alexander, and Curtis. Everyone arrived, looking tense. None of them had received confirmation of the final certification. "I've asked you here to discuss the future of our certification processes," I began. Curtis leaned forward. "Shouldn't we first address the Westboro situation?" I smiled. "That's exactly what I'm addressing." I opened my laptop and turned it to face the room. The final certification was approved at 4:17 this morning. The Westboro project will proceed as scheduled. Relief washed over Alexander's face. Several board members exhaled audibly. "Excellent work," Vivian said. "How did you manage it?" "By leveraging the relationships I've built over a decade," I replied. "The same relationships that were dismissed as redundant 2 weeks ago." Curtis's expression remained neutral, but I could see the calculation behind his eyes. The immediate crisis was averted, but he still had a long-term strategy. "Now," I continued, "about the future of our certification processes." I clicked to the next slide, displaying a new organizational chart. "I'm proposing a certification and compliance division, with specialized teams for each regulatory category. Each team would have multiple certified representatives to ensure continuity." Board members nodded approvingly. This addressed their concern about reliance on a single person. "Additionally," I continued, "I've drafted protocols for regular board oversight of certification processes and compliance risks." Curtis cleared his throat. "This is essentially what I began implementing before." "No," I interrupted calmly. "What you began implementing was the elimination of experienced personnel without understanding their function. What I'm proposing is actual redundancy through depth of expertise, not cost-cutting through ignorance." The room went silent. "Which brings me to my final point," I said, clicking to the last slide. "While securing the Westboro certification, I discovered something concerning. The screen showed a comparison of certification dates for identical product categories, ours versus our main competitor. Our competitor has been securing certifications an average of 17 days faster than us for the past 6 months. This pattern began shortly after our last reorganization." I looked directly at Curtis. "When we streamlined the certification department by reducing headcount, board members leaned forward, studying the data. The increased certification timelines have cost us approximately $27 million in delayed product launches," I continued, "and created an opening for our competition to secure market advantage." Alexander looked stricken. "Is this verifiable?" "Entirely," I confirmed. "I've provided the full analysis to Vivian." Vivian nodded grimly. "I've reviewed it. The findings are concerning." Curtis's face had gone pale. "This is selective interpretation of..." "Additionally," I pressed on, "during my absence, I consulted briefly with our competitor on their certification processes. Their approach, investing in relationship managers rather than reducing them, has yielded significant competitive advantage. The implication hung in the air. While Curtis had been eliminating expertise, our competitor had been capitalizing on exactly what made our company valuable. I believe, Vivian said into the silence, we need to reevaluate our recent organizational changes more broadly. She looked pointedly at Curtis. This will require leadership willing to prioritize operational excellence over short-term cost metrics. And there it was. Not a dramatic firing, not a public humiliation, but something far more devastating to an ambitious executive: the clear withdrawal of institutional support. Curtis knew it immediately. His career trajectory at this company had just flatlined. As the meeting concluded, board members clustered around me, asking questions about the new division structure. Curtis slipped out silently. 3 weeks later, the company announced a strategic realignment. Curtis was transferring to a subsidiary in another state, a lateral move that everyone recognized as a demotion. I didn't attend his farewell gathering. Instead, I was in a planning session with my new team: Helena, Diane, Janice, and 6 other experienced professionals we'd brought back or promoted. Together, we weren't just managing certifications. We were rebuilding the company's operational backbone with the full support of the board. The revenge wasn't in getting my job back. It wasn't even in Curtis's demotion. It was in creating a system where expertise was valued, where experience couldn't be casually discarded, and where no one could ever again mistake institutional knowledge for redundancy. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more tales of workplace justice. Remember, your worth isn't measured by those who undervalue you. It's proven when they realize what they've lost. Share in the comments any experiences you've had with companies learning hard lessons about what redundancy really costs. Until next time, know your value and never let anyone convince you otherwise.